Welcome to Shut Up and Say Something. I am your host and creator of the show, Deedre Daniel. This podcast is all about how to live a fascinating life, and we're learning how to do that one interesting conversation at a time. We try to stay away from discussing politics, religion, and the ad nauseum topic du jour, but anything else is fair game. And today I am speaking with Chef Andrew Markert. He is the head chef and owner of 2 restaurants in the Washington, D.C. area. In fact, they're just a few blocks away from the Capitol. And one restaurant's name is Beuchert Saloon, and the other one is Fight Club. And Chef Andrew is known for cooking with an edge and an attitude that's all his own. He brings a lot of new energy to fine dining. And I met Andrew when he was a chef at the Tallulah restaurant in Clarendon, Virginia. Do you remember that?
Long ago, long
Long time ago. And I had recently moved to the DC area. I didn't know anyone at all. And staying at home was just awful. It was night after night of me just staring at the ceiling. So I thought, all right, I'm going to take myself out to dinner. And I like to eat really good food. And so I found Tallulah. And what I loved about it is they had this counter that faced the kitchen. Then I didn't feel so weird just sitting there alone, having dinner by myself. So I was watching everything going on in the kitchen. And what I loved about watching Andrew was just watching him work his magic. I love watching someone who is really passionate about what they do. And not only was the food exceptional, he was just so inspiring to watch him pour all that energy into what he was creating. Plus, he's like 2 feet taller than everyone else in the kitchen. So he definitely stood out that way as well. How tall are you, Andrew?
6'7".
6'7". Yeah. And it seemed like everyone in the kitchen was like 5 feet tall. It was this big, massive giant doing all this awesome cooking. So anyway, I was traveling for work, and anytime I was in town, I would stop off at Tallulah. And then eventually Andrew moved on to bigger and better things, and he started his own restaurants. And we're going to talk about those, especially some of his creative approaches to food, which I also think translates into problem solving, and also how he managed through COVID, plus some recipe ideas for you. So welcome, Andrew.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Some of my friends still talk about that time you came to my house and you were searing up all those scallops and you created this bacon mousse that you put on top of the scallops. They still bring it up. And I think that was probably 10 years ago. Maybe that was a long time ago.
Maybe more, yeah. I remember the scallops. I don't actually remember the bacon mousse. I remember corn and I remember scallops and maybe a risotto. I feel like I might have pictures of that on my phone somewhere.
But yeah, these people still talk about that bacon mousse. I know also some of it got on somebody's shirts. They were bitching about that.
Oh, I think it was a bacon foam. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so like the can exploded, and so it got on someone's shirt, but that's okay because it was delicious, and so everyone was sopping it up. So they were still talking about that. You posted on March 15th, 2020 on Instagram and other places that your only restaurant, Beuchert Saloon, would need to shut down for an unspecified amount of time due to COVID-19 restrictions. And fast forward 2 years later, you opened up other restaurants, which is awesome. And I wanted to talk about what happened during those 2 years and how you survived, because that was a lot of creative thinking on your part to pull it together.
Yeah, for sure. It was definitely something you never expect to happen or have to deal with. When we posted that first post about closing down, I think at the time the mayor had handed down the restrictions that no tables within 6 feet of each other, no parties larger than like 4, I think it was. And Beuchert's is such a small restaurant that kind of limited everything we could do to only serving about 5 people or so a night. In the picture, you can see how sparse the tables are, how very limited our options were. We closed inside dining altogether, closed basically everything altogether, except for we were allowed to do to-go and delivery as quote unquote essential workers. Which I was found to be an interesting title for fine dining restaurants or upscale restaurants. We closed that was Sunday, which was our 7th year anniversary. That was a strange present. Then Monday, the 16th of March, I got a tattoo, which was kind of funny because that was my first kind of like, this is really a wild time ahead of us because we were wearing masks. And he was like, I don't know if I'm going to do any more tattoos. Since I was his last tattoo for about 2 years, I believe.
What was your tattoo?
A bison head tattooed on my thigh as like a 7-year anniversary gift. Very like American traditional by an artist in Frederick, Maryland. He's really well known.
And so you had planned that a long time ago. Obviously, you had reserved that, what, 6 months, year out
Yeah,
or
probably like
something?
5, 6 months, something like that.
Yeah.
So then we did that, and then we were closed on Monday, and then Tuesday we opened for delivery. We still had a full kitchen for the most part because we were planning on opening on Monday. We didn't know
Mm-hmm.
it would be a shutdown until there was a shutdown. And so Monday we opened up for delivery with just the menu we had. We thought we were going to do 0 sales. We thought nobody was going to come do pickup, but thankfully Beuchert's is in such a nice, really close niche neighborhood. Like everyone really supports everyone. Everyone supports the restaurants and the businesses within that neighborhood in Capitol Hill, Eastern Market specifically.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone supported us throughout the pandemic. But that Monday we got crushed with orders. Like we were not expecting it. We didn't even really set up the line for service. We kept everything in the low boys. We didn't take anything off the tops, like so you could just grab and go, like making things real fast. So we were
Uh-huh.
pretty much in the weeds for the whole service. And there was only 4 of us. Myself, my chef de cuisine at the time, and my 2 front of the house managers. And so the 4 of us just got crushed for that whole week. We started with just 5 days a week. And then as things changed, we started bringing more staff back that we felt comfortable bringing back.
Mm-hmm.
Dealt with our fair number of exposure potentials and having to make calls about closing on certain days when we had no staff because everyone was sick or no one was sick and everyone was exposed. And it was such a crazy time. No one knew what to do or how to handle any of those situations because it was all brand new to everybody in the world. The level of stress, the level of anxiety of, am I going to go to work today or am I going to get sick? I only got COVID once, and it was just this last August. I made it through pretty much the height of the pandemic without getting it, and a number of my coworkers also made it through without getting it. The whole time was scary. It was definitely scary, and to lack the support of any, let's call them overseers of the restaurant world and the government and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Do what you can to survive.
Yeah.
Was daunting at best.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, as we went through the first few weeks and months, we tried to figure out what made the most sense. Beuchert's was never designed to be to-go food. So we started leaning into those comfort foods a lot. We did a lot of to-go kits, to-go meals for 2 to 4. We did some barbecue. We just started trying to cook what we like cooking and having fun with it to try and have some sense of normalcy or some sense of sanity while going through all of this. So we
Mm-hmm.
did chicken parmesan, we were doing roasted chicken dinners, we did Thanksgiving kits, we did New Year's kits, basically anything that we could throw at a wall that stuck and made the restaurant money and the stuff kept the staff employed. I did delivery for a while. I was using the hashtag Druber Eats and I was driving all over Capitol Hill, dropping off food and literally whatever we could do. It was crazy.
Yeah. Well, you had to figure out what customers wanted
Yeah,
and
that was
what
the other part of
you
it.
could do, like what you literally could deliver
Right.
on. I noticed you said comfort food. That's what everyone seemed to be craving, huh?
Exactly. Yeah. A lot of meatloaf and pastas and sandwiches was a big seller. Our burger, French fries. We did chicken parmesan sandwiches. We did chicken parmesan dinners.
Mm-hmm.
Leaned into a lot of like comfort Italian food. Those really sold well. We would do like Wednesday kits, and each kit would be like a different one every week. So those really, really sold well. Nothing that we would normally do at Beuchert's is essentially what we did.
Right,
And we
because
had
some of the things you're doing, it's really fancy. It's all based on presentation, and that little squiggle of sauce or what have you is just going to slide all over the place as you put it in a container, right?
yeah, no
Yeah.
swooshes, no foams. Just throw it in a box and write the name on top.
Right. Yeah. My entire business that I had launched in 2019 was all based on in-person events. And so I had to figure out something, and I turned my card game into a game show. That's how I survived, was doing online game shows. And I never ever went into that business thinking, oh yeah, I'll just be doing card games online like that. Never even thought that would be my thing, but that's what paid the bills for 2 years for me.
Yeah,
So
I mean, we
yeah.
did the cooking classes too. We did cocktail demonstrations for various groups and organizations, and we would have to like package all the booze and secretly mail it out because they're not allowed to ship booze.
Yeah, I
Uh,
understand. Uh-huh. Do you need
so
me
yeah,
to edit that out?
it's fine. It's too late now. Yeah, we basically
Andrew
did whatever
Markert,
we could.
bootlegger. Yeah,
Put it on my business card.
that's right.
Yeah, we did whatever we could, and then after March till August, somewhere around
Uh-huh.
there. We basically ran as Beuchert Saloon. Prior to the pandemic, we had been working on another restaurant that we actually wanted to open next door to Beuchert's, but the contract or the lease agreement didn't work out. There was another party in front of us in line to sign a lease, so they took over that space. So we put it on hold. We looked at some other restaurants as well, restaurant spaces. So we ended up putting that on hold once the pandemic hit, but we were working on a sandwich concept called Fight Club. Because Beuchert's has always had a bit of a sandwich following. We've had an array of different sandwiches, including our burger, depending on how you define a burger as a sandwich or not.
Hot dog a sandwich?
It's a hot dog a sandwich, same idea, yeah.
Right.
Is a taco a sandwich? I mean, it's folded.
Mm-hmm.
The age-old question, is the hot dog a sandwich? Same idea.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, we were working on Fight Club, which was a passion project because I love sandwiches. And we had always done like our core 4 sandwiches at Beuchert's, which was our Dr. Lawrence, which was our open face meatball sandwich, our OMFG dip sandwich, which was like a porchetta sandwich. Then we had a banh mi sandwich that we would do every year. And we kind of rotated those through the 4 seasons.
Is that based off the movie?
Not really. We use some of the parts of the whole of the movie for fun. Like first rule about Fight Club is always talk about Fight Club.
Okay.
The idea originally was it was going to be a punch garden and sandwich shop. So punch garden, like a beer garden, but with punch cocktails, draft cocktails, things like that, that you could get punch bowls or pitchers and have some fun group activities. So Fight Club, punches, punch fight was the idea there.
I see. Okay.
You got, and then club for club sandwiches. So it just kind of,
okay.
yeah, it was a fun name that I hashed out with a good friend of mine. It's been that ever since. And so
when it came out, so you're up in DC, I'm down in Florida, so I wasn't able to come to your restaurants during that time. But when you released it, I thought it really had something to do with the movie. And I thought it had to do with perhaps losing hope and digging deep and coming out fighting or something along those lines. The things you own begin owning you. That's what I thought.
We can go with that. That sounds way cooler than lunches and sandwiches.
No, because I mean, during that time, it was just so crazy for everyone. And we were all sort of losing hope. And at the same time, when you lose hope, you find freedom. And so the freedom to then create another restaurant when everyone else is wondering if they can just hold what they do have together. I thought that's what was going on.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely was. Once we opened Fight Club inside of Beuchert's, I didn't even know if we would reopen Beuchert's or what would happen. There was lots of different thought processes of how the future would be. And was it like a situation where we would survive or not? And if Fight Club survived, would we just flip Beuchert's into Fight Club and keep it that way? Or, you know, you just think about all the options over and over and over again until you figure out which one makes the most sense.
Yeah.
But luckily, we flipped Beuchert's into Fight Club, and it helped us survive for 14 months during the highs and lows of the pandemic and what those entailed. And we eventually opened up back 7 days a week as Fight Club. We mostly just did outside seating for the most part. We were allowed to do inside seating, and we did do inside seating, but I think people always thought of Fight Club as like an outside concept. So people I think really understood that we were also open inside, which was interesting. So we had a large streetery for a while and like extra seating on the patio area out front.
I've never heard the term streetery before.
Yeah, me neither. Streeteries and parklets.
Yeah, we have some parklets down here.
Yeah. The amount of architectural designs I had to, and my business partner had to hand draw to get it to DDOT or whatnot to get approved was hilarious.
Oh, I bet.
Most of it was just like, look, and this came from people who were in the government side of the planning. They're like, draw the picture, then do whatever you want because no one's checking.
I was going to say, like, how could they?
Yeah, like, yeah, please come by and tell me to shut down my business in the middle of a pandemic. That would be awesome.
Right. I mean, they're not even up to date in good times.
Yeah.
So first off, they don't have the manpower. And secondly, to tell you to shut down in the middle of all this. No.
And we weren't doing anything obscure. Like we were just trying to cram as many seats as we could to make enough money for our staff and for the restaurants to stay open, you know?
Right. You're trying to survive.
Yeah, exactly.
Which also keeps the city alive.
Yeah, that was the big part of it, how to keep the city thriving and how to keep people wanting to stay in DC. And I know lots of cities lost a good percentage of their population to move into the countryside because everything became remote. So nobody had to be in an office. No one had to be at their cubicle for 8 to 10 hours a day. It was like, well, I'm just going to go live in X countryside or go live by the pool
and that impacts all the restaurants too.
Yeah, exactly. So you see a huge decrease in sales, but we also had limited staff. We weren't running our full staff every day. It would be like one server, one bartender, and like 2-3 people on the line.
Yeah.
Especially with Fight Club, it was a lot easier to run daily operations with just a few line cooks, unlike Beuchert's, which takes a full kitchen brigade almost.
How does this change the way you approach business now, having gone through that?
I definitely look at everything as like, how can you adapt if you need to, or how can you change your viewpoint? A lot of people get stuck in their concepts and this is what we're doing and we're not changing our mind. I try to always think about, okay, what's the next step we can do to make more money? And I'm going through that right now with Beuchert. We make almost the exact same sales every single week. And so I'm trying to figure out what I can do to squeeze more out of this space. It's nice to know exactly what you're going to make every week because you can budget accordingly to some extent, but what can we do to make the business more profitable or to allow our staff to make more money? What we just did was we added a raw bar aspect to Beuchert's. The kitchen's comprised of 4 stations. Essentially, you have the cold side or salad side or garde manger, depending on the kitchen and how you want to describe it. You have grill, like fryer station, which basically just all the meats, the burgers and things like that. And you have saute, which does all the pastas. And then you have the expo station, which receives all the items and then plates them and sends them out on their way. I was looking at the stations and which ones made the most money, which ones had the most sales. And the cold side station had the least amount of sales. I was trying to figure out how to increase that. So we added this raw bar aspect to that. We have oysters and clams and lobster and caviar and crab claws, and we do a big orca platter kind of thing. We call ours the Belafonte platter. If you're familiar with Steve Zissou's Life Aquatica.
Yes.
That was the name of the boat, was the Belafonte.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So we have a big ode to the Belafonte above the raw bar as well now. Next thing we're looking at is maybe adding a chef's tasting to the seats in front of the kitchen. There's about 8 of them. So we might try and do weekly chef's tastings there, which is something I was doing at Newland, which closed end of July. So
All right. So Newland was your new concept, fancy restaurant number 3.
Yep.
And unfortunately, it didn't last very long, right?
No.
And I know that's got to be heartbreaking because you pour your heart and soul into this dream. And then what happens? I was reading some write-ups about it and that you had some really whimsical things like caviar in lunchboxes, which I just think that's so fantastic. And you had a treasure chest with little desserts in it at the end, and you were serving the check in a book, like an actual children's book. I love that, where you're blending beautiful, artistic, fancy food with something nostalgic. When you think about like little kid food is so simple, right? And then you're combining the two together. And I think it's a shame it didn't last. I don't know if you want to talk about that or if it's a sore subject.
No, we can talk about it. It was definitely one of the harder things I've had to do in my career, closing something I put so much effort into. We basically started that August of 2022. What year is it? 2021.
2022.
So yeah, we started that. We signed the lease August 2021. We worked on the space up until March 10th. We opened.
Now, when you're working on the space, you're building it out and decorating it and pouring all this money into the aesthetic, right?
Right. So yeah, it was what they call in the industry a turnkey operation. So it was a kitchen before, or was a restaurant before rather. But it was a restaurant for 20 years that had operated. As you can imagine, with any business operating for 20 years, it develops some quirks, I guess you could say. And in the restaurant industry, it can tend to be like slap some duct tape on it and make it work until we can fix it. So this restaurant definitely had a lot of that happening to it. Once we started digging into it and started flipping it and getting it ready to open, we discovered a lot of things that were wrong with the space and needed to be fixed. And 20 years of being out of code with the health department, you have to do a lot of repairs with that. Not that they were operating at a level of to be within the health department regulations, but things like this sink doesn't need to be air gapped, or this sink does need to be air gapped, or this one doesn't need a garbage disposal anymore. Lots of things like that you had to figure out.
And you're pouring money into that while you're not bringing money in as you're getting it already. Yeah.
So we were kitchen line had to be trashed because all the kitchen equipment was probably a decade old and falling apart. One of the ovens didn't have a door on it. I don't even know if the burners worked. Everything was pretty roached and rusted out. So we got rid of the whole line, which was a whole headache unto itself because trend right now is supply chain issues.
That's an excuse in a lot of situations, but
So, okay, well, we want to open in X days. We wanted to open in 3 months because we had 6 months rent abatement. We wanted to open in 3 months to get 3 months of money coming in,
right?
Where we weren't paying rent, which would have been great. We didn't open until after we'd already paid our first month's rent. One of our pieces of equipment on one of the stoves took 16 weeks. And I think it ended up being 18 weeks because the wheels hadn't come in on it.
This is like a terrible reality show.
Really,
or
it
really
really
good
was.
reality show.
All the other stuff was pretty quick. The woodwork got done. We had some really good woodworkers on that. And it did give me a lot of time to really develop this idea of Newland Road was where I grew up. It was the first kitchen I ever worked in, you could say. So
Uh-huh.
for me, it was like a return to where I started learning how to cook, but also my childhood and little aspects of that I found to be nostalgic within the food itself. And the food was definitely way above what I was eating. It wasn't like SpaghettiOs and special dinner that my mom would cook. It was elevated techniques that I've learned over the years, things I've been wanting to hone in on. And we had a really, really, really special team of both front of the house and back of the house staff that were all in on it. Thankfully, we kept a fair amount of them at Beuchert's and at Fight Club. The little nuances, the lunch boxes. I definitely had one of those lunch boxes when I was a kid. And caviar is something that's so fancy, and people who love caviar, I think to some extent expect like a little bit of a whimsical touch to it, or some cool nuances to it. So we did two types of caviar. We did like beignets that we would coat in sour cream and onion powder.
Yum.
Sour cream and onion chips are one of my favorites, as well as my sister's and her husband's. Little personal touches like that. The gold foil books, someone always had those when they were a kid.
Yeah.
Every table we would serve would pick up the book and be like, I remember this when I was a kid. I had this exact same one. And I got them all on eBay. Some had like, this belonged to Ben, or this was Sally's, or so they all kind of nuanced touches to it. Bought the sleeves that you would get in the back of a library book, and I put them in the back of the book. So that's where your credit card and check would be. One of the biggest things I had to figure out, the lunchbox, the lid would open, and then, but we wanted the lid to also stand as a vessel to hold part of the dish. So we had a tray that had the beignets and some other accoutrements and the spoons, and we wanted those to land on top of the lunchbox.
Yeah, but the box comes in at an angle then. So what do you
down?
Yeah.
Right? So it was like, how do we keep it level so that the inside has the caviar with the frozen ice? We did frozen glass pearls to keep the caviar cold. So I found on eBay all these little old school action figures like Battle Beasts and Dragon Ball Z characters and Winnie the Pooh characters. And so when you ordered caviar, they would clear your table and you would sit there with your glasses, your water and your wine or cocktail or whatever. And then the server or manager would come by and they would just put this little action figure on your table. And that was it. And so everyone's sitting at the table like, what is this? I got Goku, I got a battle antlers. And then the lunchbox would land. And they would open the lunchbox lid, and the lid would land on top of this action figure's head.
Smart.
Hold it. That would hold
I
it.
love that.
And then you would gray out and put it on top of the other side of the lunchbox, and then would reveal your caviar with all your little accoutrements and all the fun stuff.
Oh, that's so cool.
That was one of my favorite little touches, that and the treasure boxes, which I hand painted multiple times because they kept on washing away, and was like finally polyurethane them and got them to stick. But
because you have to wash it and it all comes off. Yeah.
So I got those finally good, but then they had little jewels in the bottom, because when I was a kid, I always had a little treasure box full of little tchotchkes and things that I always wanted.
So everyone got the treasure chest at the end.
Yeah. So
even didn't order dessert, they got a little treasure chest of little desserts.
At the beginning, we did a tasting menu, which was 7 courses, and you would get the chef's treasure box, which had 3 little desserts in it for each person. Or if you just ordered the prefix menu we were running, which was 4 courses, you got 1 chocolate at the end of the meal, which varied depending on what we were doing.
And you made the chocolates yourself too?
Yeah, we made everything in-house, top to bottom, pretty much, which is a huge operation. And I think some people found it to be maybe a little out of their price point, but for what we were doing, it was a lot of work, and we needed that kind of price point to make it work.
I looked at the price point and I do not think you were pricing yourself out at all. I think it was timing. I really do, because I was talking to Drew before we started recording, and I was telling him when I went up to DC over the summer, like everyone was still wearing masks. My cell phone was blowing up, telling me with these different alerts that I had just come in close contact with someone who had COVID, and none of that was happening down in Florida or other parts of the country, really. I think people just were a little bit more sketchy about going out.
For sure. Newland had a really strong opening. We were doing good numbers, good sales, finding our own. But I think timing, one, we did have a lot of COVID cancellations during our 6 months of opening. And the sales did decrease like week over week from our initial opens. So we tried to start pivoting again, which was the nature of the beast. And we started doing an a la carte menu, and we started doing happy hour menus, and we started trying to do whatever we could to keep money coming into that space. And we were doing 6 to 8 covers a day. I truly think if we had made it to October, we probably would have been okay, but
Mhm.
we just ran out of runway and couldn't continue operating. I
Yeah.
mean, we were basically operating at like 180% cost. That's not how you run a business.
Yeah.
People say you should envision to lose money the first year of opening a restaurant, but we just weren't in that place. We had just also opened Fight Club in May, so
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah, it's just
it
a
worked
lot
out.
all at once. It's a
Yeah,
lot to manage. I'm so sorry that happened. Are
yeah.
you thinking about bringing it back at any given time?
Not
It just sounds
currently.
so amazing.
It was really special. There was definitely a lot of tears on the last night of service.
I bet.
We all partied pretty hard.
Yeah.
And 2 days later, I was graced with my first case of COVID. So
Ah,
thank you,
so do you
universe.
think you caught
Yeah.
COVID on your last night of your restaurant?
Pretty much, somehow, some way, I got COVID that last night.
Somehow that's poetic.
Right? I was
Yeah.
literally like packing up stuff with the general manager and moving it to like storage unit or whatever. And I started feeling sick and I tested negative. So it was whatever. We were in the car going back and forth from the restaurant, picking up, dropping off. And then the next day I felt worse and I drove to work. And before I got out of my car, I was like, let me test myself.
Mm-hmm.
I took a picture of it on my steering column. It was just like, well, guys, I'm going home. Sorry, see you in a week.
Oh man, probably just emotionally, mentally just needed that
Yeah.
time to just decompress anyway.
For sure,
Oh.
but I was stuck in a room in my house because my girlfriend and I live together and she works from home. So I was just stuck in our guest room for 10 days by myself,
Quarantining.
watching all of Netflix, watching all of Hulu. Like I ran out of
Uh-huh.
stuff to watch, and I wasn't even the mental mindset to want to read a book or anything either. I just was like checked out.
Sure.
Didn't want
Yeah.
to do anything. Yeah, that's how I closed my restaurant.
Aw. How do you think your life has changed now after going through all this? Because some of this is traumatic, it's emotional, it's a lot of change. You stressed yourself creatively. Like you're definitely not the same person you were 2 years ago,
For
I would
sure, yeah.
imagine.
It's definitely like a gut punch. I feel like going into 2020, I had such high hopes for Beuchert's, and that was all we had was Beuchert's, and we had ideas for Fight Club, but I had
Mhm.
such high hopes for Beuchert's and where I wanted to take the food, and I had a really cool winter menu that I was working on. I was super excited for it, and then get slapped in the face time and time again. It definitely takes you down a peg.
Yeah, but you're still holding strong.
Definitely mentally different person, I feel like.
Mhm.
I mean, I haven't lost my work ethic up until today. I've only had 2 days off a week, maybe once in the last 6, 7 months, aside from having COVID.
Yeah.
Definitely have the work ethic to still be pushing through this. I feel like my creativity has been a little numb lately. I feel like I have to push a little bit harder to get that out of me.
That's understandable though.
Yeah. I put a lot into Newland, and then not having that pan out also was like a gut punch.
It's love, right? You've poured all this love into it. You need some love back.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what you need. You need the love back and you didn't get it.
Yeah,
I noticed on one of your social posts that you wrote a love poem on Valentine's Day to your guests. Was that to your guests?
I think I wrote two. I wrote one for the singles and one for the couples.
Have a bunch of women showing up, like trying to stalk you after that, or your girlfriends out there throwing punches. This is a new Fight Club.
That would be funny. No, those were fun. That was a fun thing we did. Like really dove into those kinds of ideas, and we did a playlist.
Yeah.
We did like a singles playlist too, which was really hilarious. And had
What was on the singles playlist?
had a lot of self-love ideas. Let me pull it up real quick.
I Touch Myself by the Divinyls?
Or on there. I really wanted that hidden song from Green Day. At the end of the song was like, "I'm all by myself. No one was looking." Let's see, albums, no, playlists, Beuchert's Love List, and then we had Fight Club Self-Love was the list it was called. Yeah, I Touch Myself, Love Myself by Haley Steinfeld, Long View by Green Day, All by Myself by Green Day was on there, Orgasm Addict by the Buzzcocks,
I haven't heard that one.
Really? I saw them
No.
in London actually for my 30th birthday.
Really?
It was a really good show.
Fun.
Dancing in Circles by Lady Gaga, Feeling Myself by Nicki Minaj and Beyonce, Fingers by Pink.
Okay, just coming up with that list, that takes time, right?
Yeah.
And there's no definite ROI on something like that, but it just adds to the overall aesthetic of your organization. All those little touches matter. They
For
do.
sure.
Yeah.
Right.
But after a while, you get drained. So where do you get your creativity? How do you fill yourself back up again?
Some days I find I can do it. Some days I'm still trying to figure it out. For me, it's always been the return to past and childhood, much like we did with Newland, and thinking about where you came from and where your food has come from. And where you learned how to cook, like from my mom, from my dad, from those activities with friends. And I find inspiration traditionally everywhere, like walking down the street or walking through a grocery store, or anytime I go grocery shopping, which my girlfriend hates, I'm all over the place. She's meticulous. I have a list. This is what I'm getting. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to go look at the protein, and then I'm going to go look at the vegetables, and then I'll figure out what I'm going to make from there. And I don't look at recipes. A lot of people are like, I have to have a recipe, and I'll figure it out as I go along. So,
well, that's where your talent is.
Yeah.
A lot of people can't do that. They need a recipe. They need a formula.
That's always been the way I've cooked for the most part. I've definitely, in my latter years of cooking and owning a business, gotten better about designing recipes and writing the recipes and making sure that they're consistent. When I was younger, I was more of a off the cuff, do it once, figure it out how I did it the first time, the second thing, like, oh, I'll make it work again.
That means you're not a good baker, though.
No, I'm not. I mean, we make rolls at Beuchert's, but that's about the extent of my abilities.
Yeah, I'm a terrible baker because I'm like, oh, is it really a cup of flour? Maybe they need a little more. And then I peek in the oven. You're not supposed to do that either because I want to mess with it. Yeah, makes me a terrible baker.
No, that was one thing they always said in culinary school. If you're culinary side, like savory side, it's a recipe. But if you're in the baking and pastry side, it's a formula, and don't mess with it.
Right. It's science.
Exactly.
Do not mess with it. It's so precise.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lots of food trends have changed, but changed maybe even more so due to COVID. So you talked earlier about how people were craving that comfort food. They needed that because they were sad, they were freaked out, they needed meatloaf. Chicken and celery were both considered luxurious and trendy food items in the past. What unusual edible items do you think are going to become common? But also, just where do you see food trends going now?
Right. I see more obscure fruits and things like that are people gravitating towards. I feel like that whole food movement, like utilizing whole food, has been a big thing, manipulating things a little bit less to the point where you can understand what they are still. So there's a lot of cool companies doing new exotic things. There's a company in New Jersey that does some really interesting citrus. So finger limes are always popular over the last decade or so. They're like these little tiny limes that when you open them up, it's all these little tiny pearls of caviar looking citrus. And those have been something trendy for a little bit now, but they have fresh grown yuzu and bergamot and ashi, really cool, fun citrus fruits that you can use in different ways and use the rind of. They do Buddha's hands, citron, and things like that. They also do plums for umeboshi, where you like cure the plums and dry them. Big in Japanese cooking. I think fun things like that, different fruits and vegetables that you don't see on a regular basis. I think people are looking for new experiences and new flavors that they're not used to seeing every day. Not everybody wants salmon and broccoli anymore. They want salmon with sudashi, citrus, and purple broccoli, and things that catch your eye a little bit more. We're definitely playing around with vegetables that we are seeing from our farmers lists.
What about like bugs? There's a movement to eat more bugs. Are you seeing any desire like that?
I haven't done that too much. I've eaten a few bugs in my life, mostly bike riding. They just fly in your mouth. I've had some crickets and some grasshoppers. My good friend Christian is a chef as well. He does really amazing Mexican food. He's from Chihuahua originally, but he does some cool things with grasshoppers, and I've tried them a few times, and crickets and things like that. And they taste like overly dried raisins to me.
Okay.
But I know that there's a lot of thought process going into utilizing bugs in cooking, just because it's a more sustainable product as well. The protein that you find in those versus the protein that it takes to raise a cow or raise a chicken, is raising a bunch of crickets. That translates immensely to the world.
Right. Are you embracing any of the other alternative proteins, like the lab grown meat?
We use Beyond Meat, Beyond Beef. I feel like we really call it beef because it's not beef, but Beyond Beef, we use that at Fight Club mostly. We do burgers with it. I haven't tried very many of the lab grown ones. I know there's like the chicken tenders you can get in a bag. And I had a really interesting conversation with a gentleman a while ago, I think worked for, I forget the name of the company, but they're out in San Francisco, like Miracle Meats or something like that. He was telling me all about how they can literally grow animal protein in a bag in an anaerobic environment. So there's like no bacteria. Yeah. And then they can even flavor that chicken to taste like beef or taste like pork or taste like dry aged beef or taste like whatever.
What do you think about that?
That's pretty cool. It's definitely, I'm assuming it's the wave of the future at some point when it becomes cost effective.
Sure.
But at the time he was telling me it was like $1,000 a pound for this chicken.
Yeah, no one's gonna Yeah, you can't.
I'm gonna have to charge like $4,000 a plate. It's really worth.
Oh yeah, people pay that. Sure.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. That lab grown meat actually looks like meat. It's cells that have been replicated, and you don't have to worry about hormone injections and any kind of antibiotics injected, and they don't have to feed those animals because it's not an animal.
Right.
But
Yeah,
it just sounds a little Franken meaty, right? It's a little
for sure. Yeah. It's gonna come out of the plate and grab you like Beetlejuice.
yeah, totally. From what I understand, you really can't tell the difference.
Yeah, I believe it. I've talked to a few vegetarian and vegan friends and asked them, and I would say it's about 50-50. Some people don't eat it for their diet. Some people don't eat it for the animal rights.
Yeah.
So I think it's 50-50. There's something to it. And I definitely think with the environment and the way that we treat the earth, that there's definitely a use for those kinds of things with the amount of water and nutrients it takes to raise animal and cattle and different things.
Do you think your tattoos, a lot of which are pork related, do you think they're going to, oh, you just have one pork related one? Isn't it a big one though?
Yeah, it's my whole rib cage.
Your whole rib cage. Yeah. Okay. So that's big. Do you think you'll ever regret that, or you're hiding it from the vegans and everyone else who's like, how could you do that? How could you serve bacon foam on scallops? You're a terrible person. Like 20 years from now, and all the youngins have come through and they're eating alternative proteins. They're like, how could you eat this? Do you think that'll ever happen?
I don't know. We're all the creature of our times. I don't regret any of my tattoos.
Well, you could always just say it's lab grown, right? I mean,
It's a
how will
lab-grown
they know
tattoo.
it's lab grown? It's
Just
lab grown.
painted on and then it just slowly seals
That's
in.
right.
No, I enjoy eating animal proteins. Like that's who I am. I enjoy cooking them and I enjoy the artistry of cooking them. So I personally won't ever regret it. And I don't know if there'll ever be a time where we don't have those in our cuisines. But who knows in 50 years or 60 years what that'll look like.
What do vegan chefs put on themselves? Are they putting like blocks of tofu? What what kind of tattoos are vegan? What? I'm sorry, what?
Wouldn't be the prettiest tattoo, just a random
No, it's
block,
this big old square, it's
just says
tofu right
firm
here.
on it, maybe. You know?
It says firm. That's what they have on their butt.
Firm tofu.
I mean, if they put a bunch of vegetables on them, they really have to be careful because, oh, I just love eggplant. The connotation of something like that now.
Right. Oh yeah, the emoji. Do you have a
Great.
emoji?
Is that a peach on your butt? What is that? Yeah.
No, true. There's definitely a lot of chefs that have cool vegetable tattoos. I think Sean Brock has that Chihuahua beet on his arm, and it's the candy cane striped beets. And that one's really,
Oh yeah. Okay.
So there's definitely lots of options, I think, for someone who wants to get a tattoo that's a vegan chef, perhaps, or maybe they want to get like a pig head with a cross through it, like a no smoking sign.
There you go.
No pigs.
No pigs. So you were on a reality show. You were on Chopped. And yes. First off, how did you even get on that show? Did they find you or did you apply?
They found me. I was working at a restaurant in Georgetown at the time called Hook. One of the casting directors, her name was Rachel. She and another friend of hers came in to Hook for lunch or dinner or brunch or something. I remember being extremely hungover at the time, and this would have been like probably 2008, 2009, something.
So it had to be brunch.
It definitely was brunch if I was hungover, because back then my hangovers only lasted like an hour or two.
Okay.
Now they last on the whole day. So yeah, they came in, I chatted with them, and they were like, "Would you ever want to be on Chopped or Food Network?" And I was like, "Yeah, I would do Chopped. That sounds fun." We had done those kind of like competitions against ourselves. Like my good friend Tom, who's also a chef, he and I would throw down at Hook on occasion, and just like someone would come up with a mystery basket, and then we would make whatever we could come up with and then serve it to the front of the house and see who liked what better. So they liked me, and I had expressed interest in going on. And then they kept in contact for a few years. It took a while to get on. I think at the time, Chopped was only doing like the tri-state area around New York City. So we kept in contact. They did a couple more interviews with me. After a while, they finally were like, "Okay, we really want you to be on." I had changed restaurants a few times since then. And at the time I was at PS7's in Chinatown.
Yep.
And I think you visited me there once.
Yeah.
Or a couple times. So they interviewed me there, came to visit, and then finally they cast me. I think it was September of 2010. I went up to Brooklyn, stayed with a friend of mine and taped all day. It was about, I had to meet them at the Whole Foods in Manhattan at 6 a.m, which was also a weird, sketchy thing to do. It's like, wear a rose on your lapel and a blue hat.
It's weird they wouldn't just have you meet in the studio.
Yeah. I think it was for a carpool situation. And so it was myself, a chef from Atlanta, a chef from New York, and a chef from Boston.
Mhm.
And it was a long day. We got to the studio at 7. I don't think I really ate anything except for Red Bull and coffee and maybe like a donut. It's pretty rough all day. I think I crushed like 4 pieces of pizza once we got done filming. And so, yeah, you start cooking at 8 a.m. and you do the appetizer section. And it's just like the show on TV for sure. It's 20 minutes flat. There's no editing, there's no stopping. About the only time you get to think is while they're like, open your basket. And then as you're pulling the ingredients out, you have like maybe 30 seconds to a minute while you're pulling the ingredients out before they're like, go.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're pulling all the ingredients out and thinking about what to make. And we had Dungeness crabs for one course. We had bone marrow for the first course. And then the one that has always been, to this day, something that people joke with me about is Neapolitan ice cream was the dessert course. I made it to the final round, but depending on your opinion of the episode, I either lost or I got robbed.
Oh, I am on your team robbed, and I know exactly why. Do you want to know why I think you didn't get it? You want to hear it? Okay. All right. First off, all the chefs were supposed to use every single item in the basket. And he did. He followed the rules. He used every single item in the basket and it looked great. Meanwhile, the chef that wins goes in with this sob story at the beginning about how she's never been able to go overseas to visit her husband's family and she would like to use the money for that. And she didn't even use all the items in her basket and she wound up winning. And I swear they were just all about giving her the money so she could go overseas to see this family that wasn't even her family, their in-laws, like whatever, but it was just so ridiculous. I'm like, absolutely not. Boo. And then you went in there. I think they didn't like the fact that you said, I run my kitchen like a badass. You said something like that. And I'm sure they thought this guy's a little cocky. We're going to knock him down a little bit. I think if you went in there and said, oh, I'm going to feed a bunch of starving children with my money, then they probably would have given it to you.
Probably.
Absolutely. Yeah.
No, I couldn't have said that better myself. I wholeheartedly agree with you. I think it's funny too. If you watch the episode, I think it's like season 6, it's called Merrily We Roll Along or Merrily something like that. Merrily.
I don't remember the title. I just remember thinking you got robbed. But
yeah. It's funny because you are right. In the beginning of the show, they cast me as this like arrogant, I run my kitchen like a badass, as you said, which isn't really me at all. When they originally cast me, I had a mohawk, which was fun for a while. And then they called me 3 weeks before the episode filmed and they were like, can you grow your mohawk out? Hair doesn't really work that way.
Here, let me get on that.
Yeah, grow faster. So they were definitely trying to cast me as like this badass guy. Here's a little behind the scenes thing that they don't show you is that every single course I finished with jazz hands and they cut it out. I was
so there was editing. There was editing. They decided this is how they're going to position you. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think they actually asked me to say like I run my kitchen like a badass or something like that. And
the thing is, though, you do run your kitchen like a badass, but it's just awkward to say something like that.
Yeah, everyone who watches is like, this is awkward to hear you say that. It was interesting. The amount of cameras was kind of shocking too. You turn the corner and you're in the kitchen and there's like 30 cameras in front of you and you're just like, oh my gosh. I wasn't nervous when I was cooking, but then when we did the first dish, I got really nervous and I was just like, I made, oh God. And you can kind of hear it in my voice, or at least I can hear it in my voice.
You know, other people
I know
don't know. I would be a mess. I would totally be a mess. Would you do something like that again?
I don't know. Maybe if I did, it would only have to be like a day or two. I don't want to do these long shows that are 6 weeks away and the amount of like stress and anxiety that goes into that. Stuck in this like pod of people and you're just like, can't do anything but this. You can't contact your friends, family. Don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. That aspect of it is like very scary to me. I don't know how I would handle that nowadays. When I was younger and dumber and I could just do it, probably.
Okay, so let's do our own Chopped. I'm going to give you a list of items and then you tell me what you would make out of it. Okay. And we'll just have to pretend it's going to be amazing because we don't actually see the end. So you might need to write this down because it's kind of a list. So I'm thinking it's the Friday after Thanksgiving. Gotcha. And I have 1 pound of leftover roasted turkey breast.
Just the breast, no dark meat?
No dark meat. because for
Mommy,
whatever reason at this family gathering, they wanted to eat all the dark meat. All right.
my
So all
dad,
we
my
have
dad
is
said,
1 pound of roasted turkey breast, a cup of cooked sage stuffing. And we're going to go 5 roasted carrots, some buttery mashed potatoes, a hunk of stinky blue cheese, a sleeve of Ritz crackers. Do you want to write any of this down?
I've got it so
Good.
far.
Okay. A carton of vanilla ice cream,
Mhm.
some stale popcorn from yesterday, half a bottle of flat champagne, and 4 ounces of bourbon. And you could, of course, assume that the pantry is stocked with just some, basic stuff. So, what would you make with those items for a midnight snack?
Is this like chopped situation where I have to use all of the ingredients, or
No, you don't have to use all the ingredients. No, you don't have to use all of them.
I just want to know the rules before I go into
Oh,
this.
yeah. Right. Yeah.
Midnight snack. I would probably use the turkey, the mashed potatoes, the carrots. I would drink the bourbon. Maybe take the champagne, make a sauce with that, like maybe some turkey stock and the champagne, reduce that down, make like gravy out of that. Oh, did you say there was gravy? No gravy.
There's no gravy. So, you're making gravy with the flat champagne?
Yeah, so I'm doing like a little flat champagne sauce with some maybe chicken stock and flour, chopping up the carrots and the turkey, folding that into that sauce there. And then take the mashed potatoes and do like a shepherd's pie style on top of that, mash it over the top, crumble up the Ritz crackers and put that on top of there too, and toast that in the oven. So you got a little gravy, turkey, carrot, mashed potatoes on top with the crunchy crunchies on top of that.
Okay. All right.
Sip on a little glass of bourbon and eat the leftover Ritz and blue cheese.
Sounds
Popcorn will
good.
throw away.
What were you throwing away?
Popcorn. I love popcorn, but not stale popcorn.
Yeah, you did something with kettle corn when you were at Tallulah.
I remember we did a duck with a caramel corn once. And that had like caramel corn. I think it had like tater tots maybe and like a duck sausage.
That's what it was.
Yeah,
That's what it was.
that was a
Yeah.
long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was a good one. That sounds tasty.
Okay, what about the vanilla ice cream? You're not doing anything with that.
Oh, that's dessert, just a spoon.
Just a spoon. All right.
I love vanilla ice cream.
I've
That's probably my go-to.
I've always wanted to see a restaurant called Midnight Snack, and they're just open from 11 p.m. till 3 in the morning. You can go in fancy pajamas if you wanted to. And then when they deliver the check, they give you a bedtime story to take home with you. And then they have all different kinds of nut butters and weird jams and toppings to make different sandwiches with. But then they also have the dinner
Yeah,
that you can assume was like served that night. So it would be like the leftovers. You're calling it the leftovers, even though it's not. I think that would be so fun
that would
to
be
have
cool.
something like that. Yeah. Well, and you got to think like all the other restaurants close, and then you have your hospitality crew coming in, and then the
Or
late night people coming in. But I just have never seen that anywhere.
it'd be almost fun if it was like repurposed refrigerators and some of them were hot inside and some of them were cold inside, and you open the refrigerator and there were meals ready and you just go sit
Ooh,
down,
I
you know?
love that. Yeah.
Then it's like midnight snack and you're just grabbing, here's a sandwich in the cold fridge, or here's a
Yeah.
hot plate of chicken in the hot refrigerator, and it's just like a facade to an oven kind of a situation.
Oh, I love that. That would be good, especially for to go. So there are a lot of
Yeah.
people coming out of the bars and they just want to grab something good besides pizza.
I feel like a lot of restaurants nowadays are doing less contact, less people on the floor,
Yeah.
lot overhead. So something like that would be pretty cool, kind of that like grab and go kind of situation.
I'm seeing a lot of ghost kitchens coming up, and then kitchens within restaurants. They're delivering food from Denny's, but it's actually not branded Denny's. It's the Burger Den,
Yeah.
what have you.
A couple of people have reached out to me for Beuchert's and Fight Club to do those kinds of things. And I don't know if I want to do non-branded. I'd rather get my name out there than not get my name out there. And I don't want to serve sandwiches are us, so that's actually Fight Club.
Yeah,
Just
right,
post
right.
everything.
What were those things called? It was it the automat or something that you just opened? This is way before you and I were born, but the people would go to, it's kind of like a cafeteria, but they would open a little window and pull out like a hot plate, and it had
Oh yeah. I
on
know what
it.
you're talking about.
Yeah, back to your point with the refrigerator that's actually heated or what have you, and it's midnight snack. I feel like there could be a modernized turn on something like that
Yeah.
for
Everything's
people.
cyclical, right? Style, food,
Yeah,
everything in general.
yeah, because people loved those back in the day.
And it's almost like those sushi restaurants now that have the like conveyor belt, same kind of situation where it just comes by and you just grab the sushi you want and then it keeps going. Same kind
I
of
wind up eating all the stuff I don't want because as soon as it comes by, I grab it. I'm like, oh, that looks good. And then I eat it. And I'm like, but that's not what I wanted. I wanted something else. And then I wind up overeating.
waiting.
Yeah. A lot of people eat alone. I was reading just how many people eat alone. Even if they're in a relationship, they're not eating together as a family. They're also not eating together as a couple. And then there's just so many single people. So, what do you cook when you're alone? Or what would you recommend someone make for themselves? And
I go back and forth with meal prepping because if I'm at work, I normally eat pretty trash. And there's also a 7-Eleven within close proximity. Taquitos and Slurpees are a staple in my diet, unfortunately.
that's
Um,
crazy. You have all this amazing food at your fingertips and you're sucking down a Slurpee.
that's the principle of you want what you don't have kind of idea. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I have pastas and things like that, but I never want to eat it when I'm at work. I do some meal prep occasionally. That's been a while. I think last time I cooked for myself, I made gringo tacos. So I use ground turkey because I was trying to be healthy. Ground turkey, Old El Paso taco seasoning, because if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Uh,
Right.
diced tomato, lettuce, cheese, and then I'm a crunchy taco kind of guy for the most
Uh-huh.
part. Yeah, I love a good crunchy taco. I think I ate about 6 of them though, so less healthy when you eat 6 of them. You could do
Good.
that with your leftover turkey meat and make some turkey tacos with stuffing
Okay.
and
All
blue
right.
cheese.
And would you make
Uh,
like stuffing croutons? You got to make them a little crispy because otherwise it's
yeah,
gonna be a little soggy or something.
cook them up with the blue cheese maybe.
I encourage people to have game nights at home, but what I can't stand and what a lot of people don't like is when people are playing a game together and then they're eating finger foods. And so then they get that cheese powder dust on the cards or they get finger grease on the playing pieces. I always tell people don't have finger foods for game night. You should actually have a big pot of soup or pasta or chili or something like that where you're using utensils so you're not getting your nasty fingers all over the cards. But
Right.
can you think of a good party snack that you would recommend for people that wouldn't get cheese dust fingers all over stuff?
No cheese dust fingers. You know that
No 7-Eleven taquita grease on on the playing pieces.
I do love a good bowl of soup, especially on like a game night. That sounds fun. I'd probably maybe make pozole. I really love those kinds of flavors in the fall and winter. Pozole is like a huge, tasty bat of chili, garlic, onions, all stewed together with a pork
Mhm.
shoulder normally. You could do it
Yum.
with chicken if you wanted to, if you don't eat pork. So it's normally like guajillo and ancho chilies, a lot of oregano, garlic, onions, and you normally puree the garlic and onions and chilies all together and pour it back into the sauce. And then
Mhm.
it's sort of served with like tostadas, avocado, lime, sour cream, shredded cabbage, and it just soothes your soul to your core
That sounds good.
flavor. And then hominy actually is the other part of it. It's the big, huge like corn kernels that you cook and then they puff up a lot and they're really
Mhm.
tasty. That's probably one of my favorite soups to eat. And I think that would be amazing on a cold game night with family and friends.
Okay, so it is your last day on earth. What are you going to eat?
Oh, that's an easy one. I actually use this as an interview question often for chefs and cooks. Being from Maryland, Baltimore, born and raised, I'm a huge crab fan. And so that's always been a big part of my culture and a part of my family is getting together for crab feasts. So I would do full of steamed crabs, corn on the cob, some garlic bread, oysters on the half shell, shrimp cocktail, and some hams beers, if you're not familiar with. They once had a brewery in Baltimore, but are mostly from the Midwest, but we've developed it as our own dad beer at Fight Club in Beuchert's. So cooler full of hams for sure, and then key lime pie for dessert.
You had to clarify hams because people think, why do you have a cooler full of pork? Yeah.
Pork, exactly. Well, I do have the pig tattoos.
Yeah, they're like, man, this guy really likes pork. Yeah. All right. Oh, and key lime pie.
Have to have key lime pie. It's like a non-starter. If I'm having crabs, I will stop somewhere on the way home and find key lime pie.
Yum.
Fight Club's become this kind of cool, fun, nuancy restaurant of its own kind of character after running it for so long in not its space and now that having a brick and mortar for it. It's become this colorful tiki Southern garden party adjacent place. And the sandwiches are definitely not something you would see on a regular delicatessen menu. We have a sandwich we call the Das sandwich. It's like schnitzel with mashed potato or potato salad on top of it. And then we do
Yum.
yeah, it's really, really good. Really popular. We do a riff on a Pittsburgh sandwich called the Permane Brothers, but it's Permane and the Tots.
So instead of French fries, it's got tater tots in it.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
probably better,
It is.
actually. I've had one of those Permane Brothers sandwiches, and the French fries are kind of slimy.
Yeah, the tater tots
Yeah.
have a nice crispness to them. And then we do our signature sandwich is called the Fight Club, shocking name. And that's strip steak, brown butter mayonnaise. We make mayonnaise and then fold brown butter into it. Roasted tomatoes, bacon, and shredders. We do a tonado melt. It's a pork sandwich. Shocking, I know, I love pork. With tuna. It's like a pureed tuna salad, essentially, with American cheese, pickles, bacon, pork on pork.
Wow.
Yeah, that's our riff on a tuna melt. All the sandwiches are fun and different and have riffs of like original sandwiches.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's a pretty cool spot. Check it out. We can do Fight Club for lunch and Beuchert's for dinner.
All right. For everyone in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, you got to come in there and see him.
DMV represent.
That's right. It's time for the pet peeve segment. Everyone has those little things that annoy them, but we rarely mention them when we get to know someone. What are your pet peeves?
Not taking criticism well is probably one of my biggest pet peeves. When I work with people and I tell them how to do something differently and then they just don't listen to me, that really gets me red in the face. I'm trying to help you do your job and your career better and you're not listening to me. I've been doing this since I was 15.
Sure. And they should be absorbing all the feedback so that they can be even better.
And I always say to people, there's always two things you can take from any situation. Either if it's the right thing to do or if it's the wrong thing to do. You can take how not to do it again or how to do it again better.
What were you afraid of as a child? And what are you afraid of now?
As a kid, I was afraid of bugs for the most part, snakes, although I had snakes as a kid, but like maybe wild snakes,
Okay.
animals, spiders and things like that.
Yep.
As an adult, I feel like I have a bit of a fear of heights, which is odd coming from someone who's 6'7", but
Well, you have so much further to drop.
Exactly. It's a long way down.
Yeah. You're so tall. Your head's up there so high. So if you're just a step down a foot, it feels like you're falling so much further.
Exactly. It's weird. It's only happened like lately in the last maybe 5-6 years that I've noticed that I'm not really a fan of heights. I wouldn't do a hot air balloon. I don't think I would jump out of a plane or do bungee jumping or anything like that.
Nothing like that.
I could do like a zip line. I really liked that when I was a kid, and I feel like I have a fond memory of those. But free falling, less appealing for me.
Rounding this out on a positive note, what are you looking forward to in the future?
Near future, I'm going to Maine to visit my sister. My parents will be up there for Christmas, so we're really excited about that. Distant future, I'm just trying to plan a trip out of the country. 2020, we were supposed to go to Italy, and so hopefully we can try and revisit that situation.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, I'm hopeful and looking forward to possibly expanding the Fight Club empire to other locations and broadening that kind of spectrum of my career.
Do you have a bucket list restaurant that you want to go to?
I mean, I'd really like to go to French Laundry one day. I feel like that was such a huge life as a young cook that I never got to go to or haven't been able to go to or afford to go to. I'd like to go there one day. That, I think, more than anything, when I was coming up in the industry, the French Laundry was the cookbook to have, and no one was doing food like he was doing food. But the amount of money that it costs to go to these places nowadays is something that's hard to swallow too.
Yeah. My husband and I dropped a lot of money at Bizarre Meats in Las Vegas.
That Jose Andres's place?
Yeah, but he had borrowed the recipe from Joel Robuchon for the potatoes, his mashed potatoes. Have you ever had those?
Robuchon potatoes? Yeah.
Yeah, they're so good. Oh my gosh. I'm always trying to explain that to someone. I'm like, okay, so then it's 2 parts butter and potato, and they're running it through cheesecloth over and over and over again. And the butter comes from a little part of France, and it's $5 an ounce or some shit like that. It's crazy. And the potatoes are a special potato that they boil with the peel on. It's so good though.
They're good. They're
Yeah.
wild.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but yeah, it's so expensive.
When my book is done, if I sell 10,000 copies in a year, then I'm going to Chicago to go to Alinea. Have you ever eaten there?
Yeah, I did
Oh,
once.
is it amazing? Because it's a bucket list thing for me.
It was pretty amazing. I went in 2007. I spent all the money I had in my bank account on dinner. I was a sous chef making like $40,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
I have this much money and I'm taking the girl I was seeing at the time to Alinea. It was great. And then I actually got to work there the next day. I staged for a night in the kitchen.
What did you do?
A stage, you work at a service essentially and see how they do their food, learn some stuff. You just work for free for a night essentially.
And they knew this ahead of time, or when you showed up for dinner and you were so into it, then they said, why don't you come back tomorrow?
No, so one of my buddies was a line cook for me when I worked in Rhode Island, and he was a line cook there. Went there to visit him and visit Chicago. And so he got me a stage there. So I got to work like the first 4-course section of the menu, desserts as well. So I did all those kinds of things.
What did you learn?
I learned that I didn't want to work there.
Oh, really?
Really hard. Yeah. It was really hard, but it was also just not really my style of food, I guess you could say. That was when molecular gastronomy was like really big.
Yeah.
I like learning aspects of that and how to do it, but I don't want it to be the main component of how I cook. If that
Is it
makes
too fussy, you think?
Yeah, it can be a little too fussy. I want to be able to recognize what I'm making. I don't want to sit down and not know what it is when I eat it.
Yeah, I guess sometimes when you deconstruct everything,
Not
you
food
lose
anymore.
something there. Yeah. Yeah.
So I feel like I'm more on technique behind the house, like behind the scenes, and the product forward that still looks and acts like what it is to some extent. There's a company in North Carolina that makes fried chicken that looks
The
like
fried chicken ice cream?
Yeah.
No, I wrote about them in my book and I told them about it and they sent me a bucket of the fried chicken ice cream. But in this book I have coming out, I talk about them and how amazing they are. And I told them about it. They're like, thanks so much. Here's a bucket of the ice cream. But I've bought it a few times and it's expensive, but it's delicious. Have you tried it? Ice cream is not only beautiful, it is delicious.
Yeah, it's got the like white chocolate bone thing in it, so it's got like a bunch.
Okay, yeah, well, so it's got a cookie bone and the cookie has been dipped in chocolate, and then the white chocolate part of it is where they mixed that in. They caramelized it with the cornflakes, but I think they also put some other stuff in there along with the ice cream they made, which is waffle cone flavored ice cream. It is so good. The innovation behind it. They also have a baked ham ice cream. Have you seen that one?
I've seen, I've scrolled their Instagram pretty deep.
And now it's time for the very interesting game show. This isn't trivia. Throw accuracy out the window and give me your most ridiculous and creative answers instead. And let's see if you can come up with the most interesting answer. Are you ready?
Some of these are questions I have not said on this show. I wrote them and I've used them in other game shows. So this is going to be a first for some people. What would be exceptionally odd to find stuffed inside the cavity of a Thanksgiving turkey?
A human foot.
Ew, that would definitely kill dinner.
Maybe somebody kicked the turkey and it fell off in the process.
Ew. Okay, very few English words rhyme with the word silver. Make up a word that rhymes with silver and give it a definition.
Filver?
Bilver, okay.
Filver with an F? Filver?
Is it filver or bilver?
Filver. Maybe
Filver.
Maybe like a PHILVER concept.
So kind of like the band Fish.
Yeah.
Okay. And what does it mean?
Filver, the act of overflowing your car's radiator.
Filver. Okay. I was expecting something restaurant related, so it's interesting we went there. That was like when people put things in the toilet, even though we have a sign that says you can't do that.
Somebody threw an air freshener in our toilet at the restaurant the other day, and I had to have a plumber come and unclog it, and he pulled out this air freshener, and I was like, you've got to be kidding me.
Why an air freshener?
Please save me the $300 and don't throw up air freshener in my toilet.
What's the matter with people? Okay, next up. Where would be a funny or inappropriate place to post a Yelp review? And I also want you to include a review. So an example of this is like writing a Yelp review for a funeral And then the review is the crying seemed genuine. The casseroles were cold, but so was the beer. And the crowd was sort of average looking. I give this funeral 3 stars.
Okay. I've actually seen a review. I always thought it was really funny. Someone leave a Yelp review about a beach.
Like, what is too sandy or something
Yeah.
like
I
that?
saw one. I think it was for the resort. The sand had sharp seashells in it. The water was too cold and a shark bit my son. 1 star.
I saw something about the Grand Canyon. Like, it's just a big hole. Okay, next up, cockroach milk has 4 times the protein as cow's milk. How do you milk a cockroach? And what would you make with cockroach milk?
I bet you would have to crush them to milk them. I don't feel like you could do the cow udder machine.
Yeah, I've heard people say they'd stroke the antenna.
Stroke the antenna. Huh. Interesting. Let's make some lattes.
Lattes, cockroach milk latte.
Let's do it. Or you can make ice cream and we could do affogatos.
There we go. Yuck. Okay. Scientists have figured out a way to unboil a hard cooked egg. What else should they figure out how to undo?
Let's undo vegan tattoos.
No tofu tattoos.
No more tofu tattoos. Let's reverse the tofu tattoos.
Extra firm. I seriously feel awkward holding a eggplant in the grocery store now. Like I do. Like I pick it up and then I look around to see who's looking at me holding the eggplant, like quickly throw it in the cart.
Move along real fast. I
Yeah.
actually don't like eggplant, so I hardly ever buy it.
So you're hardly ever holding eggplants in public.
Hardly ever holding it.
What about peaches?
I do enjoy peaches, but I enjoy nectarines more. The emoji could be a nectarine.
They're close cousins.
Yeah, I don't like the fuzz as much. I think it does something yeast, like the yeast on the outside.
Yeah, I don't like that word either.
Yeast. Definitely not a baker.
No. Although I make a beer batter bread that is delicious and it is so easy to make.
Nice.
For the last question of the day, which is asked in every single episode, what should have been invented by now?
What should have been invented by now? I want some sort of crossbred animal. I feel like pork and chicken for some reason. Then you could have like pork wings.
Would it be called a pickin'?
Yeah, let's make a pickin'.
A pickin'?
Pickin'?
Love it.
Pickin'
So then you
wings?
have pork wings.
Buffalo pickin' wings.
Uh-huh.
Fried pickin'.
Yeah, that sounds good.
I feel like if my word for filver had been food related, we could have had some filver fried pork pickins.
Yeah, yum. It's a certain coating that goes on fried food.
Right. Yeah. It's pickins coated in filver. Filver seasoning.
Yep. Yum.
Boom.
All right. Well, thanks, Andrew. How can folks get in touch with you?
You can reach me at info@beuchertsaloon.com or info@fightclubdc.com. You can make reservations through Resi for either restaurant. Beuchert's is at 623 Pennsylvania Avenue, Southeast Washington, D.C., right up from the Eastern Market Metro. And Fight Club is 633 Pennsylvania Avenue, Southeast. So just 4 doors down from each other.
All right. You made so many changes. It completely took away your original plans and went with it. And a lot of people refuse to lean into those kind of changes. Do you think you did it because you had to, or because you're so used to experimenting with so many different recipes and seeing what works? Did that make you more comfortable in leaning into some of these other changes?
I think it was a little bit of both. I had to change to survive. It was either that or close and figure it out on the back end. But I wanted to support the staff as much as I could and support the city as much as I could. So it was a little bit of doing what you had to do and doing what you needed to do. I don't know. Going back, I don't know. Reverse, would I do it again? Maybe not. Maybe I would have tried to take a few months off and see how it all played out and then go from there. But in the moment and then at the time, I was just dig in and keep going and figure it out as you go. So definitely being able to invent and come up with things on the fly and day to day, and having that aspect of my ability was definitely a huge bonus or a huge factor in doing this and surviving it. But I don't know if I would do it again.
Sometimes people ask me about my business. Would you have done this had you known all the things you'd have to learn and all the mistakes and all that? And it's a tough question because I'm happy to be where I am, but I
Yeah.
don't know if someone had laid out all the things I would have had to do to
Yeah.
me ahead of time. Like, I don't know. That's a journey.
Yeah, if someone was like, you're going to have 2, maybe 3 restaurants in 2 years, but in order to do that, you have to survive a pandemic, change your concept 6 different times in 5 different ways, maybe have 5 panic attacks and possibly die from a virus. I don't know if I would do it.
Right.
I also don't know if I would believe somebody that I would have done it. Like, that doesn't sound like me.
I think I'll just go to Italy.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, exactly. Supposed to be on a beach in 2 months. What are you talking about?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I really appreciate you being on the show.
This was fun. Good to see you from far, far away.
Well, I'll make it back up there. I usually go up to DC a few times a year. So,
Cool. Let me know. I'll make sure I'm working or I'll stop in.
all right, great. All right, everyone. Until next time, be interesting.
My restaurant, which I thought was amazing, didn't work.
I would be bitter. I would totally be bitter. And I know the quality of food you put out. I know this. I've seen it at multiple different restaurants, saw it in my own home. And when I read that the restaurant was no more, I was crushed. I thought, what the fuck is wrong with people? That's
Yeah.
what I thought.
I'm not much of a crier, but I definitely cried that night.
I can imagine. That's just so much effort to put into something like that. So much effort and love. And really awesome touches.
Yeah, it was really something
Yeah.
special. It really was.
I think you can bring it back.
I just don't know if I have the energy again, honestly, right now.
You're heartbroken. Like, how do you get back out there? I don't want to date. Your heart's broken. You know, she left me at the altar, kind of
Food
thing.
doesn't
Like, it's
taste the
just, I
same.
can't date again. That's kind of where you are right now.
Well, that's true. That's a good point. I haven't really looked at it like that.
Yeah, you'll get back out there. I
Yeah.
think the world needs caviar in a lunchbox.
For sure.
too.
I still have all that stuff. I put it in storage.
Yeah, don't get rid of it. You've always had so much creative energy. I think it's great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Right now, I don't feel like I do, but hopefully my heartache will mend and I'll be back soon.
Yeah, you'll get your groove back. And then you'll be even stronger than before.